first of all, being a guy who's been in the business for so long, and we had this conversation when you were by here not that long ago, and we were talking, that something's going to happen as far as the new men and women who are going to be on the streets of America to face what is going on in this war against the police officers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you? Is it? I don't know if it's quite as bad in Mississippi. Thank God. Right. Do you think so?
I don't think so. I think it has a lot to do with the geographical location of and culture of those geographical locations. For the most part, in the South, and I can say specifically here in Mississippi, we don't have those type of, as you say, thank God, don't have those type of confrontation. But let me say from a national standpoint, when we look at the current climate between law enforcement and communities, I think that we have certainly delved off onto I think, a dangerous path, right? For the most part, the community, I think, has gotten a little bit jaded, confused about what the role of a law enforcement officer is. Let me tell you why I say that. For some reason, citizens believe that law enforcement officers are counselors, are health care providers, and things of that nature. Because we are so intertwined with the community, and so many things come up. And I think as we have this 21st century discussion about what the new law enforcement model looks like, we have to take those things into consideration. And let me say this. One of the things, Paul, I took exception to was when the conversation began about the whole notion of defunding the police, right? Which made no sense to me. And I think by design,
makes no sense to them now because they're trying to redo that in most places.
Oh, absolutely, because it was just I don't know if it's by design, but I would think it'd have to be, because when you put the word defund and police together, you got to know what the implications are. But I just think that the person who came up with that idea could have chosen better words. Reallocation of resources would be a better way to present it. What I mean by that is that in our profession now, it is incumbent upon us to have trained professionals partnering with law enforcement officers to provide mental health care. What I mean by that is we should have social workers and mental health providers associated with the law enforcement. Yeah. Okay? Because we're going to run into contact with people who are ill. It happens when people have a broken arm. Are they in a bad car accident? Who do we call? We call AMR.
But how many times, Marshand, can you do that, Sheriff, when it's a 911 call and you're in 2 o'clock in the morning and you're rushing out and the guy it won't come out of the building?
Well, when you think about that, when they don't come out of the building, what do we normally do? We normally quarantine place, shut it down, and just maintain a posture, right?
So you're saying that it would be a good idea to have someone trained, for instance, a hostage negotiator.
Sure.
And we don't do that because we don't allocate those funds for it.
We don't, and that's something we're going to have to do. Again, as you talked about hostage negotiator, the healthcare mental health provider I'm talking about, a care worker, they have the same type of skill set to deal with a person who is on record as
Why would it be that hard to do that, though? Why couldn't you have that liaison between you and someone from another government agency, mental health department, et cetera, et cetera?
It's not. I mean, it just has to be a priority. Now, what is difficult and what is really important to note is that you do have to have the funding for it. But it's so much funding out there, Paul, for these type of partnerships. That shouldn't be an excuse either. You just have to have a good grant writer. You have to have a good partner at the federal and state level to be able to handle it. But it's easy. It's doable. I put it like that.
One thing the elephant in the room that we can't ignore is since the Obama administration, the PR for police officers in this country, and it's gotten even worse every single day, that there is no respect for police officers anymore. Well, now, I understand a few of them deserve that and cause that, but it's only a very, very few, and that's true of any occupation in this country. But now when you have people, and we see this, and it goes like viral and wildfire on just about every social platform, where you have anybody standing up and telling somebody, you work for me, sit down, shut up, get back in your car and leave. Right. And the amount of disrespect, I don't care if you're a police officer, a teacher, your parents, whoever it happens to be, that's just wrong.
Sure. And I think a lot of that has to do, Paul, with leadership. Okay, particularly, and I'm speaking from this environment that I've been working in for 27 years. You remember, you just mentioned it, when our good friend, the late great Sheriff Malcolm E. McClellan was the sheriff. You know, and I know that never happened.
No.
Right? Because, and I want the audience to know, that's because people had respect for Malcolm E. McMillan, not fear. You know, some people try to reduce him down to, you know, people fear. There was no fear there. I didn't see any of that. I saw respect. And I bring it fast forward to my predecessor and friend, Lee Vance, same thing. Nobody feared Lee Vance. They respected him. And if you look at the data, Paul, under when I was a public safety commissioner for the city of Jackson and Lee Vance was my chief, I'll give you this is real data. So last year in office in 2017, the murder rate for the whole year 2017, 53. Right now, as you and I sit here, it's 105 murders in the city. I mean, you just think about that. Now, the only thing changed was leadership. Yeah. And I'm not knocking any person that's sitting in the office. I'm just saying that if you get strong leaders and you set the right tone and the right posture and you carry yourself a certain way, the public, the general public, is going to respect law enforcement. The respect comes from the top and works its way down. And so that's what I always tell people. We have to maintain that type of posture in our communities so the people will see the chief and the sheriff and the lieutenants and all of us in these ranking positions say, if they are carrying themselves and conducting themselves in that manner, then know the ring and fine will as well.
Well, it's almost like a kid who's misbehaving, and the equation is the same no matter how old you are, is delinquency increases when consequences decreases.
Sure.
Delinquency increases when consequences decrease.
Sure.
And it happens all the time.
Sure.
And if you're not going after them, if they are getting out on bail or whatever it happens to be, and white, black, it doesn't really matter. Sure. But it's one of the reasons that we have the. I was looking at Minneapolis, a story in Minneapolis. It's out of control there. Chicago is just a war zone. And Jackson has been getting worse and worse and worse, and it's not getting any better.
Sure. And
every single day, I mean, drive-by shootings, broad daylight. We had some over the weekend, didn't we?
We did. And it happens all too often. And again, the posture, the presence of law enforcement in the communities is critical, and the way we carry ourselves is even more important. And like I said, one of the things I promote, and I know one of the topics you certainly are interested in, is this aspect of training. We have to make sure that we make training an absolute priority.
Do you feel like the men and women coming out of the police department today are ready to hit the streets?
I think they are. I think what it requires, though, Paul, and this is very important, is they have remedial training, or what you call professional development training. In law enforcement, that is not necessarily required. I mean, once you get your certificate, usually that's it. And I'm going to be promoting that.
I want to talk more about that in just a second in the second segment here. But you made a very, very good point. I want to ask you what you need as the sheriff now of the state's largest county as far as population's control. And to be honest with you, the news that comes out of our capital city affects every single spot in the state of Mississippi who come here for either business or pleasure, and certainly government. Back with Marshand, live from the Trustmark Studios. One more segment with Marshand Crisler, Hinds County Sheriff. What do you need to? What's your plan as far as getting this under control? Where your responsibility is, and that, of course, is in the county, not the Jackson City itself. But what do you need? What are your plans?
Well, let me say this: as you probably know, just over 70% of Hinds County is Jackson, quite frankly. So it is our footprint, it is our responsibility, but not our primary responsibility. Our primary responsibility is the rural areas. But having said that, we have a certain fiduciary responsibility to ensure the safety of all citizens, certainly in the capital city. So partnerships, Paul, is the way to go. We have to have a solid coalition of agencies that are working in tandem to solve crime. What I mean by that is that's from the federal, state, and local levels. Immediately upon taking office, I met with several of the federal SACs in the area, HSI, which you call Homeland Security, and others, and I'm meeting with the FBI and the ATF this week. But what we're doing is, one of the things we're doing, and as you know, one of the things that's plaguing our capital city more than anything, just like nationally, is violent crime. Violent crime is at all-time high, and Jackson has the highest violent crime rate per capita in America.
Really?
Really. And so when you look at that, I think we're at 105 in terms of our murders here in September. So we have a problem there. So one of the things that I decided to do is, upon taking office, I immediately established a gun suppression unit. I had to put an item on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors to vote upon a memorandum of understanding to assemble assets from every municipality in Hinds County. We have 8 of them. We have 3 major cities and 5 towns. All of them have been open to sending an asset or police officer to join that particular unit. Now, when we talk about gun suppression unit, I want to be very clear about this. Our target is dirty guns. And I'm going to say that again, dirty guns. So most people who hear dirty guns, who are law-abiding citizens, advocates like you and I of the Second Amendment, we're not going to get nervous because we know we don't have dirty guns.
Right. Dirty
guns is convict plus gun equals dirty gun. The federal law, state law, and all others say that if you are a convicted felon, you cannot possess a firearm. So what we're going to be looking for, those convicted felons.
You're going to do this through roadblocks or how you?
Checkpoints, security checkpoints.
In the high crime areas?
In high crime areas.
Is that in the city of Jackson too? Or?
Well, we're going to mainly concentrate on the arteries that lead into the city of Jackson, right? We're going to look at the egresses and coming in and out.
Is the city of Jackson participating in
Absolutely.
this?
They're going to dedicate 3 assets, 3 officers, and then the sheriff's department have 3 officers.
You have every legal right to do that.
Absolutely, because it's a safety checkpoint. So we're ensuring that anybody driving a vehicle in our county is doing it safely.
You cannot search that vehicle unless you have probable cause.
Correct. And so if a person comes up to the site and they don't have a driver's license, that's going to be a problem.
But they have to present you those 2 things, driver's license and proof of insurance.
Correct.
That's not
an option. That's not an option.
In the county or the city?
In the city. And if you happen to, we were talking about it in the break there, Paul, and if my officer walks up to the car and smells a funny odor, right, here we begin probable cause, particularly when the K-9 unit comes up and the dog sits on the ground, which alerts that there are drugs in the car. From that point, we have probable cause to search the vehicle. So these things happen all the time. And so at the end of the day...
Why isn't that being done now?
Well, I think it's being done, but it's not being done consistently and aggressively enough. When you have a crime rate like we have in our city that has spiked the way it has, this has to be priorities. Everything we talked about this morning, Paul, has been about priorities. We always ask questions, why is it not happening? Clearly, it has not been a priority, but it will be a priority under my watch.
Repeat offenders out there causing problems too?
Yep, that is the problem, quite frankly.
Then that partnership has to be with the courts too.
It absolutely does. And we're going to have that partnership because everybody's going to come to the table and we all going to sit around the table and say, look, you have the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We all have to ensure that we're working collectively in tandem to make sure not only are we prosecuting criminals, we're putting them in jail. We're rehabilitating them so they have a skill set when they come back out and become a productive citizen. But the judges and the judicial branch has to have stiffer penalties for folks who continue to break the law.
Are there some piles of money out there as far as the sheriff's department are concerned?
Well,
from this COVID thing and all that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we've been very beneficial to receive.
You've been able to hire some new officers or buy some new equipment?
Well, even better than that, the officers that we have just received a 5% pay raise.
Good.
And I think that's very important because we looked at the Hinds County pay chart compared to other comparable cities in the South, and when I tell you it was borderline criminal what we were paying these officers.
I think the same thing with Jackson Police Department.
Yes, sir. And we have to be more competitive because what happens is we lose our talent to other agencies because we're not paying a problem.
Well, that's it, because you were talking about the old days and having a relationship with the people in the community.
Sure.
The old days, you had a cop on the beat. They knew him. They knew the parish priest and the beat cop on the beat.
That's right.
And you don't have that anymore. And no matter how large the city was, it could be New York, but you knew who the cop was.
And that's one of mine. It's a model from, again, my mentor, Sheriff McMillan. What he required was, and what I will be requiring is that the people within the community in which my deputy is assigned need to know his name or her name. And if they don't know his or her name, I'm going to ask the deputy why they don't know his or her name. Yeah. That is how you have relationships in communities.
Marshand Crisler, is the other thing, too, neighborhood watches are so powerful when people do this. But and we can't relate to that, most of people outside the inner city areas where the crime is the worst, where you have drugs and gangs and et cetera, et cetera. These people are scared to give any information.
Sure, and a lot of times,
how do you get past that?
It's a trust factor, and when I say trust factor is we have to be more cognizant and conscientious about how we're interacting with the public. Let me give you a prime example. You call the police on your neighbor next door that they're doing some funny business over here, and when the officer comes to the complainant's house first, that's bad policing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You feel me? All that, that's bad. Okay, that's bad policing. So we have to train our officers. Say you never go to the complainant's house, right? You go straight to the source of the issue. And so again, that's one of the things that we're going to be emphasizing to our officers to make sure that we have that trust factor, because that's one of the ways to break the trust when you do that kind of stuff.
Well, also, as we said, classroom tutoring, and as you said, remedial, just to stay on top of exactly what the rules and regulations are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be tough.
That's and that PDI, like professional development on an annual basis, is very important. I sit on the board of directors for the Mississippi Sheriff and Chiefs Association, and I'm telling you, that is one of the things I'm partnering with this nonprofit to ensure that we're providing that type of training. So it has to be an emphasis, and it has to be a priority, and we're going to make it a priority. And when I get enough time, I want to come back on the show, Paul, and talk about how important rehabilitation is inside the prison system. Because if you don't want them to come back, we got to find a way to train them to be better citizens.
Well, I got to ask you this: the election is when?
The election is November the 2nd. I think we're like 43 days out or something.
November, and this is a special election.
It's a special election.
And you got you're running along what you said, 12 others.
12 others.
You've been on the beat now after the unfortunate death. For what, 34 days?
Whopping 34 days, yes,
34 days.
Yes, sir.
So
we've got a lot done doing 34 days. That's the good news.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for coming by. Stay in touch, and good luck to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul.